with Adam Levine and Mia Zamora and Nicholas.
Who's our graduate student.
And followed by Working Local, Impacting Global, Teaching in the Open with Lucas Wright and Brian Lamb, and Stories of Student Empowerment with Ian McAndrew. So the floor is all theirs. I'll be just playing with the red card.
Okay.
Oh no, the red card. All right, so we have to start. Here's a story. I was waiting
There
for
you
that.
go. Of Alan, who lives on the internet, and Strawberry. And of course, he's a brilliant educational technologist that we all know.
I don't pay her for that. So, Mia, she's an English prof at Kean University. It's not pronounced Keene. I'm still getting that difference. And she teaches classes in electronic literature.
And in January 2017, we hatched a crazy idea. We were at the DML, Digital Media and Learning Conference, which is at UC Irvine, and we decided to make some digital alchemy through a networked digital storytelling class.
But that's really another story, but there's a link for that.
In between that time, in August 2017, I made a move from New Jersey to Norway, my sabbatical year, where I took the position of Fulbright Professor of Digital Culture at the University of Bergen.
But there's a situation. There were 5 MA students in writing studies that Mia was advising who needed a thesis advisor, and somehow she cooked up this idea that I could do this from Arizona.
And he certainly did. So, no surprise, we decided to roll out a seminar that fall when I first arrived in Norway that was a co-locational seminar. The seminar was called ResNetSem, that's the hashtag, which stood for Research Networked Seminar.
And one of the interesting things was that my students were doing 2 semesters of the MA thesis, and Mia's were in a 1 semester course on a research course, and that's the course that Nicholas was in.
I'll add that there were 2 different topics. The students in New Jersey were working on their writing studies MA thesis, while the students in Norway were in a digital aesthetics seminar.
I forget, is this yours or mine?
You can take it. Go ahead.
I might have gotten us off by 1. Anyhow, we had separate course sites. They're each WordPress sites. In both classes, the MA students were writing up their research in their own blogs. They were syndicated to these 2 different sites.
And so we had 2 different spaces on the internet for their work, but then we also tied things quite beautifully together with other writing tools and other platforms that we were using together.
So, of course, we were doing Twitter, and, of course, we have to make a Twitter tags hash cloud. Thank you, Martin Hoxie. We did try to have a Slack, and that'll be a thing we come back to. We thought we could create a little bit more overlap in Slack, and something didn't exactly connect there, but we did initially have some things. I wanted my students to learn about hypothesis for social annotation. And I also want to introduce them to using RSS feeds to not only read each other's blogs, but I had my students sort of start developing their own sets of information feeds that would help their research.
So this is a glimpse of our students on both sides of the Atlantic. On the left, you see the New Jersey students. On the right, you see the Norwegian students.
And one of the things we did do through the Slack is we created these little hello videos to each other. We're not going to play them here, but they're worth coming back to. They're marvelous.
So one of the things we wanted to share out in this quick minute or 15 minutes that we have is the idea of how to seed research in a networked learning experience. So we're arguing that certain infrastructuring moves are needed in order to facilitate that possibility. The first move that we wanted to share with you is the use of virtually connecting as a kind of forum for learning for each of our student groups. So in this particular example, we dialed in to the Digital Media and Learning Conference that occurred this fall, 2017, And in that conference, we spoke with Henry Jenkins. In my digital aesthetics seminar, we were reading quite a bit of Henry because one of the important themes of the course was participatory culture. So it was a really wonderful example of sort of leveling the field and having students directly connect with well-known contributors to that field. One of the powerful aspects of what happened there is that one of our students, Catherine, who's interested in pursuing a MA thesis on the deviant art community in particular, she was able to speak directly with Henry about the formulations of her thesis and fine-tune her angle and her perspective on it. So that's an example, again, of a specific kind of infrastructuring move that is powerful for student learners.
Catherine was terribly nervous, and so, but she did beautifully, and she was. I mean, young students, they're really worried about not appearing foolish, and they want to have their research ideas validated. And to be able to ask directly of the godfather of participatory culture was a really great move. Another idea I had was, again, it's almost like doing virtual connecting again, is how can we bring some expertise into my writing studies master's students. First of all, I don't know much about literature, so I have to rely on other people to bring in as experts. So I asked some people to come in for a hangout with my students, and each of my students had 10 minutes to pitch their thesis idea to some people and just get kind of some open feedback. And so all of them really said that that was a pivotal moment for them to realize of these external experts that were available and willing also to connect with them after the session. And also in Thesis Tank, no one wins or loses. Well, everybody wins. I think that's the premise.
Before we play this next video, I'll just say that open willy-nilly doesn't work unless you sort of think about anchors for students to become empowered, to ask the right questions, and to direct those questions towards connectedness in particular ways. If it's just, why don't you throw out a tweet about this question, even in a hashtag environment that might have some attention, it doesn't necessarily yield back the kind of results that are empowering for students. So those two examples of infrastructuring moves are more specific ways students become empowered in an open environment. Let's hear from the students.
And also, I want to add, I mean, one of the lowest tech thing that was maybe the most effective was email. It was connecting my students with some people who had very specific expertise or references or other people they could connect to in the field. So just introducing your students by another colleague by email worked really well. I had this grand plan I'd be able to bring my students to the conference, but that didn't come short. But we have two of them who kind of sent some videos about their response to the experience. Oh.
Hi, my name is Marissa, and I'm a student of Professor Alan Levine and Dr. Mia Zamora at the Kean University English and Writing Studies MA program here in New Jersey.
Hello, my name is Laura Lopez. I am a Kean University student enrolled in the Writing Studies program.
My thesis is a study of personhood in young adult science fiction dystopian literature.
My thesis is basically a creative writing project centered around a series of fictional conversations with my father, who passed away on 9/11.
What I've liked about this semester is that it's been a really interesting way of exploring new technological ways of gathering data for our individual research projects.
Another aspect of the program that I really loved was, in addition to being a student, I'm a mother and a full-time teacher. So each of our sessions was run through a Google Hangout. So being able to connect remotely was really convenient. And again, I felt connected to both my classmates and my professor.
My thesis is about technology and implementing it into daily life. So it was interesting to explore that in my own life, for example, using different tools.
There were 3 tools that stood out to me that we used that were new to me. It was Zotero, Hypothesis, and Feedly.
Something else that I liked about the network nature of this seminar is that we were able to meet people from all around the world that we otherwise wouldn't likely encounter organically. And that was a really cool experience because you got to meet people who might know about your topic and they could really help you. And that happened a couple times throughout the course of the semester, and it was a really excellent opportunity.
One of my favorite aspects of the course was the thesis tank that we did early on in the fall seminar. And it was basically a Google Hangout where a panel of scholars in related fields were willing and able to give us advice and feedback on our thesis. So we kind of gave them an elevator pitch, and they were ready with resources and just good insight. And that experience really helped to shape the direction of my project very early on. And not only that, but after the thesis tank session was over, many of these experts, connected with me via email or Twitter or by posting comments on my blog. So that experience was definitely one that was well worth it and really made me feel connected and supported by a community larger than just Kane University.
I've had a great experience in this networked class, and I recommend it to everyone.
And now we have Nicholas here to talk about his experience.
So Nicholas is my student in Norway, and he was going to share a bit of his own experience in the seminar and in the networked context.
So I took part in this seminar last semester. Found it really interesting. My initial thoughts when we started this semester was that my key interest at that time was participatory culture. And I really enjoyed the thought of this silent majority, basically the larger user group of the web that doesn't speak up or do anything. But as the semester progressed, I got more and more into the notion of being networked and using your networks for more than just a social theme. And towards the end of the semester, I kind of shifted my focus from participatory culture and the silent majority and onto networked education and how you could use participatory culture in an educational way and in an educational environment. So that was basically how I progressed during the semester. Started at one point with participatory culture and ending with the same theme, just way more specific and something I actually find more interesting.
Yeah, so we thought we would end on that note because we thought it was an organic and provocative sense of what can happen when you seed research in a networked environment and things grow from an initial perspective into one that might very well grow out of the practice itself. So thank you, and we've finished early, so that means we can have a conversation a bit if you're curious about anything.
So I don't know if anyone has any questions, or we leave the questions for the end. It's up to you.
I have a quick one.
You have a quick one.
I do. I'm very interested, Mia.
Yeah? Oh, microphone.
I thought you were going to cut me off.
No questions for you.
But I do have a question for you, Mia. You
Yeah.
brought up a point which I think is fascinating, is the idea of building infrastructure around that sense of openness.
Yeah.
And can you talk more about that? Because
Of
that's
course.
really compelling to me.
Thank you so much for opening that up, because I think that's really important. So I've been an advocate, as you know, for a long time of connected learning. And I think that those theoretical models for learning might be helpful. In this particular case, connected learning really gets to your question in a way. So as I said before, I think the open context is powerful and definitely might lead to a sense of empowerment in students, but it could also leave them at risk or kind of just lost at sea. So how do we infrastructure in a way that's powerful? Connected learning really helps us home in on the specific kind of sense of pillars of what makes for transformative connection. So I'm just going to review some of those pillars in the theory and then maybe even think a little bit out loud about what moves we made or how they connect to those moves. So one of the things that's really important is the notion of self-driven interest. That is, students come into classrooms with things they have passion about, and those things should have play in the classroom. They should have a role to play within the conversations that occur in the classroom. So that's the first thing. Another idea is the notion of shared purpose. So a community of learners come together for a course experience, and there at first is just this sort of notion of getting to know each other. But over time, one can apprehend a sense of shared values, or something that everybody suddenly feels a kind of shared commitment for. And that should play a role in what happens in the classroom. Another pillar of connected learning is the idea of peer-supported learning. So it's not only the instructor in a hierarchical fashion that has the knowledge to sort of pass down, but rather that everyone in the room has something to bear on what we discover together. So the co-learner model of learning. Another aspect of the learning theory is simply academic-oriented learning. And that's where the instructor can, through experience, show all kinds of sort of ways to sort through thinking and analysis. And some of those moves that we see infrastructurally are the tools, some of the tools. And then, of course, that kind of training that comes from the field is also evident, I think, in the conversations, the kinds of things that happen in terms of building a lit review. Those are academically oriented procedures and experiences that students can have. Another important pillar, I'm trying to think, I think there's one that I'm missing right now that I'll think of later and get very upset that I've forgotten. But that does, I think just those things alone gives you a sense of the kinds of things that move away just from, okay, here's the open environment, into how can we listen to each other and build relationships? Because ultimately, the openness is important for breaking down barriers, for teaching beyond the four walls that we exist in spatially. But openness doesn't go all the way. And so those ideas like the thesis tank or a virtually connected session with a leader in the field, Alan and I often call those studio visits and other learning experiments we do together, because we want to give it a feel of stopping by and catching someone at work naturally. Those kinds of things, I think, are infrastructuring moves that facilitate connected learning and connection.
We're out. Oh, I just want to say also, like, infrastructure sounds like big, permanent, rigid structures. I mean, we're talking about stuff that we swap out on the fly and you can do very quickly to change. I mean, one thing is, like, I realized my students, they didn't know anything. They've never talked to a reference librarian. And I'm like, you're missing out on the most incredible thing in the library. And they know about the databases and the chairs and the Wi-Fi. But it's like, if you don't know how to, like, formulate a question to bring to a reference librarian, you're really missing out. And so that's a non-technological tool.
Yeah, just to back up what Alan said, is it's so important to think of that word infrastructuring more as, in the way we're using it, or the intonation that we're bringing to it, is a move. It's a strategy, not necessarily a building of a solid thing that will always stay the same.
I appreciate the idea of the intentional openness that you're framing.
Yeah.
I mean, in terms of a model that other faculty and students can think about.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Harvey.
You're good?
Brian and Lucas, what about?
You're good then?
Yeah, I
10
think so.
minutes and round of questions.
You're brave. Using the ThinkPad.
Yeah, we'll see how this goes. Okay, so let's just jump into this because we don't have enough time. We're going to run out of time. No, take your time. No, we're not fine. You think we're fine. We actually intentionally left this particular slide blank because this would be the part where we might talk a bit. I think one of the nice luxuries of being in a group like this is probably most of the people in this room can make a more compelling argument for why, in the age of surveillance capitalism, that we need to be mindful about, what learning in the open means and what we're exposing our learners to. But that is essentially the theme. And actually, I wish I could recall the phrase that Javiera finished with in the previous session, that notion that when you are in these kinds of spaces, how do you meaningfully allow the participants to actually kind of co-create the spaces they're in, and how do you be mindful of what these kinds of effects might be? So I'm going to leave it at that just because we're going to run out of time. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Lucas.
Great. So I'm Lucas Wright, and this is Brian Lamb. I'll take a little bit of time for those intros. I work at BC Campus and at UBC in Vancouver, so I have two hats on here. And Brian works at TRU, and y'all probably know him. So what I'm going to do is go scattershot through a few slides and ideas about examples where we can engage students with shaping the web and openly participating, but at the same time think about Amy Collier's idea of digital sanctuary and how we can deal with giving them resilience and helping protect the vulnerable on the web. I'll stop with the owl now. So, can open textbooks help save the web? This year I've worked around open textbooks quite a bit. And what's interesting and what we've found this year looking at the analytics is that actually they're not just being used as textbooks. They're being stumbled on all the time in Google searches. So now when someone searches for ear irrigation, instead of just looking on WebMD, they're actually finding an open textbook around ear irrigation, which is interesting as someone who spent a lot of time on WebMD when I shouldn't. Another thing about open textbooks is right now you're probably hearing a lot about inclusive access. So publishers are deciding that they can have they can use OER, Cengage, Pearson, etc., but they see a model in it. And part of their business model that I didn't realize is analytics on those textbooks. So looking at how students access that textbook and coming up with reading analytics. This is just from an article around inclusive access. Gather data that could influence changes made to future editions of course materials. That data can also go to a lot of other places, as we found out recently. So do open textbooks actually provide a digital sanctuary for students' reading data? Something I never thought we would need is to think about preventing someone from knowing all of our reading habits. Oh, I don't know this newfangled website that well. Here we go.
Scroll down and hit the arrow.
There we are.
Spot point, ladies and gentlemen.
Second of all, a really quick example is, can we help educate students and mainly connect with students and help raise awareness around what it means to be a digital citizen and digital identity? So this example is from the University of British Columbia, the Digital Tattoo Project. The Digital Tattoo Project is a collaboration between U of T, UBC, particularly the libraries, as well as students. And students create articles, they do research on what their digital tattoo is, but this year it's taken an interesting slant. They're looking at things like, what happens to my data when I put it in the LMS? Where does my data go? They've been interviewing Michael Geis. So by bringing these students together and connecting them, we're changing the way and helping them think about different ways of interacting on the web. This is the most awkward slide switcher ever for me.
Stop complaining.
Sorry. That's part of my shtick. Can we create open spaces at our institutions where students can create and share? And the example here is the UBC Wiki. So at UBC, they've downloaded a version of MediaWiki, and rather than having students participate in the great wide open, they have them create articles and contribute to articles. This is an article about Pop-Tarts that a food science course added. I added this one because for this instructor, the UBC Wiki was training wheels for using the main wiki or MediaWiki. In this case, the student talked about food science. The next year, the instructor had their same students contribute to Wikipedia. It worked really well. It was really exciting, but someone named the Pink Beast, I don't know if anyone here is the editor of the Pink Beast, deleted 2 or 3 of the articles right away, and these were student assignments. So it's awesome, but sometimes the training wheels are quite useful for students to help experimenting in the open before going to the full open space. And finally, safety in crowds. Again, at UBC this year, there's been a bit of a shift away from just using Wikipedia for course assignments to having students participate in edit-a-thons. So having them work together as a group in a certain time and space and edit articles about science literacy, where they added female scientists to Wikipedia. This was done across 5 institutions in BC. Edit articles about women artists, female artists. This is a North American movement around women in art called Art and Feminism Campaign. So by being in this single space and time, they can support each other, help each other both understand the system, but also deal with trolling and deal with some of the challenges that come when we're participating in the open. All right, I'm going to turn it over to you, Brian.
Wow. So Lucas actually prepared materials and worked through his points in an orderly and clear manner. So that was good while it lasted. Part of what this theme, when I was thinking about how we were going to do this, actually came out of last year's OER 17, which was a really actually every OER event I've been to here has been very meaningful to me, but it came out of last year with this really pervasive sense that this was kind of a watershed moment in terms of the open web and our learning on the web. And then right after OER 17, Daniel convened a few of us in Coventry for this really intense day-long conversation, and Audrey Waters was there, and the folks who did the safety and online learning workshop here last year, the Towards Openness folks were there, and we gathered and we talked and we just depressed the hell out of ourselves. Like we were just like, the environment we find ourselves in is just completely intolerable. What can we do about this? And we sat there, and Daniel, if I'm misrepresenting, but my recollection was we just kind of sat there in silence and kind of shook our heads. And I remember actually Audrey turned to me and she said, well, Brian, I've been to Thompson Rivers University. I've seen what's unique about your institution and the community you serve. What you need to do is think about how you can serve your community and let the wider world take care of itself. And that was a really kind of intense moment for me. Now, I'm not going to presume we did that, but I did want to kind of point to a few of the things we're doing here locally. So I'm not going to talk about consent forms, but it's actually really interesting stuff. Oh, gosh. So yes, I wasn't going to talk about splots, but a couple people actually asked me to talk a little bit about them. And it's actually fortuitous that we're here because actually, so splots are a co-creation between Alan Levine and myself. So all Alan did was come up with the concept of how the tools would work, all of the coding and all of the development and building and maintaining the sites. I came up with an acronym, although I haven't quite figured out what they stand for. So it's been a really great kind of 50-50 partnership to this point. And just to kind of boil down what a splot is. God, I wish I could just hit the right. I wanted to show an example of the writer tool. There we go. So essentially what a splot tool is, I mean, even though we haven't quite figured out what the acronym is the idea of creating the simplest possible learning online tool you can. And the thing that's notable about a splot is once it's kind of set up, you shouldn't need to provision accounts or collect any data whatsoever from the participants. So in other words, if you're creating a course blog, the students don't need to give an email address. They don't need to put an account anywhere. They don't need to give their name. You'll notice we default to anonymity in terms of identity. The participants decide how they'll determine themselves. The other thing is they don't actually have to learn WordPress. Now, learning WordPress is a good thing, but maybe you just want to get these students writing on the open web. So that's kind of the thread that runs across all the different Splot tools is minimal privacy or minimal data collection and trying to just simplify the process and moving that along. So I'll just, that's essentially what splotting is. I won't get into too many of the examples, but it's been used a lot at TRU. A huge advantage of the splots, and by the way, the Splot writer theme is just a theme you can install into a WordPress site. So this doesn't require any major overhead to install this on your own thing, and Alan's done a really nice job of documenting it. It's fantastic for supporting course blogs at an institution. Because account creation is and maintenance is one of the biggest issues. And essentially, too, we don't even have to do introductory workshops on how to do it. We pretty much create the site, spin it out, and we just sit back and enjoy the writing. I linked to one that's from an Apps for Access to Justice course. There's a course on law at Thompson Rivers University where the students actually use the Neota Logic platform to build actual legal expert system apps that essentially will guide you through a process. It actually was inspired by, there's a tool in London for people to fight their parking tickets. That apparently a lot of times there were fallacious parking tickets being given, but it's such a process to do the appeal that they were getting away with it. So this tool apparently walks you through the process, submits your appeal, and often will get you off the hook. So they've created ones for things like dealing with spousal abuse issues. They actually have one as well to document animal cruelty. So this is a project of real apps for real students where they literally are helping puppies. Which is pretty fantastic. I was a little hesitant to point to this, but I think when I talk about our community, we have a very, very high proportion of Indigenous students at our campus. And I can't go into it, but the Canadian history is we really have a shameful history there. And we have a gaping wound that is not even beginning to heal. And there's some interesting issues around what it means to be on the open web around Indigenous issues. I'll just point to this paper and the Makrutu CMS, which apparently Reclaim Hosting is the preferred provider. I want to chat with you guys about that. But I just wanted to point to this Knowledge Makers project just because there is still something to be said for students being able to tell their own stories on the web. So when you see things like saying, my grandmother attended a residential school in this territory, today I stand on that same land, a first-generation published Indigenous researcher. So there is still power in that basic concept of being able to tell their stories. I've only got a minute or two to go, so I'm just going to jump to, I'm not going to be able to do it an actual live demo, which is probably a good thing. The concept of cloning is very powerful in terms of supporting websites. So one of our students for this project, the Knowledge Makers, a student actually created a starter portfolio, embedded it with critical questions to aid the reflection process, and the students essentially could build on top of it and create their own spaces. And then finally, I just want to give a little shout out, and it's so fantastic that our collaborator, Brian Mathers, is in the room. And this is the Open Ed Tech Co-op. We were calling it the co-op, actually, but we weren't really a co-op because we were too lazy to actually incorporate as a co-op. And it was actually Brian who had the brilliant idea to kind of just take that notion of EdTech Co-op, EdTech Collaborative, and make it open ETC, which I think just kind of has a poetic ring to it. Open, etc. It's something open. It has something to do with technology. And Grant Potter and Tanis Morgan have been my collaborators on that, and it's just been such a blast to work with them. I know I only have one more minute to go, but if anyone wants, I can demonstrate this process later, because this is something very slick that Grant Potter has done. Essentially, we can create pre-themed, pre-configured sites ready to run, and then when people sign up from an open ETC participating group, enter their email address, determine which of their sites they want created, and hit the Create Site button, and they will get, so you can install the Splot Writer, the Splot Collector, a set of pre-configured e-portfolios just by going to the site. So I don't even have to create sites now for students creating portfolios. This is a process that works really well, and again, Grant Potter deserves the credit for that. So again, another shout out to Brian. It was such a joy to work with him on this, and he's also kind of to blame for the chicken becoming. I think the reason it resonated with us is kind of I think as ed techs, we often kind of feel like battery farm chickens trapped in our little cages and just kind of, with no room to move at all. And, the badass free range chicken ready to run really resonated with us. So thanks again to Brian for that. And I'm stopping. Thanks.
Thank you. I want to invite you to sit by while our next presenter gets installed, and we'll take questions from the public. So, actually, you know that I'm an admirer of your work. So, it's really nice to be here and having actually able to thank so many people doing so many great things, and actually. Thanks for your collection of stickers. It's great. I'm a fan. You can have a seat by the meantime here. And, questions?
I don't actually see anyone having questions. Yeah.
Oh, not yet. Okay, let's start with the keynote. The star.
No pressure.
I'm going to do that classic thing where I'm going to say, not so much a question, but a comment. But it will be a very short one. No, it's just, I think the issue of anonymity is really, really interesting. I think the way that you've worked so hard to facilitate that. And I just think there's an interesting interface there with the way that so much openness depends on licenses that require attribution. So I mean, I don't really know what I want to say about that, but I just think there's a lot more that we need to explore there about anonymity and attribution and when we need one and when we need the other. So I don't know if it's something that you've had a think about.
Yeah, that is an excellent question, and I'll just kind of dodge it just to once again, though, give a shout out to that paper on questions related to indigeneity and openness. It's a really interesting critique of some of the embedded assumptions around openness and that kind of naive information wants to be free ethos. That, I mean, I think it inspired me at the time, and it was partly what got me involved with communities like this one. But at the same time, I think as we go deeper into this and really start to look at the human dimensions of the work we're involved with, I think it's really great to have voices like that raising those kinds of questions, not just for those specific communities, but for everybody.
Thank you. Questions? Still have 2 minutes.
So when using Splat, how do you track your students if all of them can post something anonymously?
So when people are going to do graded assignments and you're using a Splat, I usually encourage the student. First of all, Alan actually coded in a little area where you can put a message in behind the scenes that will not be on the website itself. And the other thing you can just do is create a pseudonym, and as long as your instructor knows what your pseudonym is, that tends to work. I mean, we've never done a Splat like that at a scale of hundreds and hundreds of students. Our typical groups have been around 20 to 50 students, and at that level, it's very manageable.
Hello.
Should I let you answer a question?
Oh, this is great.
Can you talk a little bit about the infrastructure you're running the Splats off of for that Grant Potter? I'd love to hear more about that.
Okay, so the specific tool is a plugin called NS Cloner, and the free version actually runs beautifully with WordPress multi-site. I think anyone that's running WordPress multi-site for an institution, I highly recommend the plugin. Even the free version just lets you take any site you've built and clone it, and that's just such an incredible lifesaver when you're trying to, not just, let's say you have a site that's kind of set up for courses and you have a discussion area and a Dropbox, and once you've done that kind of work, you can really build on it easily. The NS Cloner paid version allows you to do pre-figured templates that can be public facing. So that's essentially the technology that Grant built on. And so obviously, too, the Cloud Run stuff you guys were talking about this morning as a cloning kind of principle and moving stuff around across domains is something I think we're going to be looking at. That was really interesting.
We have to move on to the next presentation. Thank you, Brian. Thank you. It was so great. It's just because we have a keynote afterwards and then the boat trip. So I think it's going to be like lots discussions in a boat trip. But now Ian is here, and well, there you go. Thank you.
Gone weird. There we go.
And me and she runs a tight ship.
Okay.
Yes, not mean.
How long have I got?
Yeah, go 15.
15. Okay. So this hopefully will be a nice, easy one, because what I've done is I've recorded interviews with about 8 different students at the University of Edinburgh who have been involved in the Wikimedia residency there. Hi, my name is Ewan. I work as the Wikimedia in residence there. I've been there for 2 years now, so I'm not going to talk too long because I really want the students to take the floor, because it shouldn't just be me beating the drum. There's a growing network of open knowledge nodes now at the university and across Scotland, and I'm really privileged to work with Lorna and Charlie. The full interviews are on that tiny URL link. They're really good. If you want to know about year 2, you can find it at tinyurl.com/wikiresidency2, and a little infographic for tinyurl.com wikiresidency for the first year. So the 2-year reports are all written up. And this is what we were trying to do: raise awareness of Wikipedia and its sister projects, design and deliver digital skills engagement events, and just to work with colleagues all across the institution about how we can better share open knowledge and benefit from the Wikimedia projects and contribute to the Wikimedia projects. So open knowledge for the win. So because time has come, the war said, to talk of many things, or for the students to talk of many things. Cambridge Analytica left a bit of a sour taste in the mouth, but we need to talk about the value we place in having somewhere online that is transparent, and how conversant, or how we enable our students and staff to be more conversant with the digital intermediaries that seem to govern our daily lives. Because after all, Google and Wikipedia have this symbiotic relationship, and search is the way we live now. And Google's dominance is undisputed, obviously. So I'll not talk anymore. I just think the challenges for universities and libraries to prepare the next generation to be informed, digital, responsible online citizens. So you can swap out librarians for universities and it still works. So over to them. Oh, it's because I've got the bloody PowerPoint on. Try again. Little tech help. Panic. There we go.
Okay.
Good. Burn it up. Hopefully you can hear that.
Yeah, I think it's a really cool project to have because it's collaborative, it's very, very real, and I think it also explores some really, really important parts of research, such as practicing, finding sources, researching a difficult topic, writing an article, thinking about planning and structuring, all that kind of thing. Like, they're skills that anyone's going to need. As a medic, it's crucial. It's a vital part of being a doctor, being able to explain a patient's illness to them. So it's always useful to practice writing maybe really scientific, in-depth things in a more understandable way, because, yeah, not only does it help other people to understand it, but it also makes sure that you know it too.
Law forms the basis of our democracy, and I believe that it is a part of our democratic rights is that we should make information open and knowledgeable to all people. And I believe that editing Wikipedia comes into that mission. There's a Law and Technology Society for which I designed a wiki project, law edit-a-thon. So I identified articles that had a focus on technology law, and quite a lot of them that need to be added or edited tend to go with intellectual property law. So I created this event just so students can kind of get a first-hand experience of what it looks like to edit Wikipedia, what it looks like to add information to Wikipedia. When you are writing in Wikipedia articles and or editing the articles, you're of course putting these legal research skills into practice. But not only that, is that you're writing articles with the law focus geared towards to people from all different kinds of backgrounds, not just lawyers and others with the legal mind.
I approached Ewan and said that I was a member of the History Society at the University of Edinburgh that I was organising their academic events for the upcoming academic year. And I really wanted to broaden out the type of events that we were doing, both in terms of the type of history that we were representing, because we did quite a lot of political history events and very few social history events and events related to underrepresented groups, but also the type of events that we were doing, because we put on a lot of lectures and some panel discussions, but there was very few opportunities for people to directly engage in history in a way that wasn't just a sort of passive listening to it. And so running a Wikipedia edit-a-thon seemed like a perfect way to combine these two things. It not only shows people that their degree has relevance, it also helps improve a resource that many people use.
Universities are meant to stimulate you academically. So in many cases, I will read something in a reading for a lecture. I will listen to my lecturer speak about a specific issue that maybe is not in Wikipedia, and I will feel inspired to make an article about it. Our lecturer mentioned Jamila Boubacar, Algerian activist for the independence of Algeria, and she didn't have an article in Spanish. So what I would do in that case is create the article. Being a Wikipedian for me, it's about being an advocate or an activist of knowledge. It's about being able to, what matters to you, be represented and be accessible to more people, and produce an inspiration to more people.
I want to take what we have been doing here at the university and take it back home when I return home, whether it's for the holidays or after I'm done with my studies, because you're broadening the horizons of others when they see these articles and the knowledge you've posted, as well as you're opening doors for your readers. You're possibly improving representation, and I think that's something we really should be working on, increasing representations of different languages, especially when you look at the number of, for example, Arabic speakers and speakers of the other major languages compared to the number of articles they have. It's really surprising. It's a stark difference.
I was introduced to One Lip, One Ref. It's something you do to celebrate Wikipedia's birthday. The idea is that if everyone adds one reference, Wikipedia will have a lot more references. So I chose to add references to Scottish psychology, and it's basically a game. So you get, sent to this article and you see the text and you're like, need to find this. And when I found the first reference, I got very, very excited. The best part was that I was also able to add more information. So not only was I able to add the reference, I was also able to expand on that point. I also think it was extremely easy to do. The referencing was really interesting. I've really realized how good it is that Wikipedia has so many open access sources, and Wikipedia is so much more than just Wikipedia in itself. There's all of the Wikimedia stuff in general. So one of the things I've found really helpful is, for example, we study a lot of brains, and brains are really confusing organs. And there's this animation on one of those pages that shows a brain that's rotating, and it shows the brain part. And I've always wondered why none of my academics use it, because it's actually openly licensed in a way that you could use it in a lecture. And I think Wikimedia in that sense offers a lot of different media so you could easily work into teaching. Having pictures of things on Wikipedia pages and adding more than potentially just text and a few references really makes an article much more interesting. So, for example, I added a picture of the university library to that Wikipedia page. I also do think that where then Wikipedia has a really good space is that academia focuses way too little on how to communicate, world-leading research to the layman people, right?
I'm Athena Franzana, and I am a final year PhD student at the University of Edinburgh. Ada Lovelace Day is a day where we celebrate Ada Lovelace, and it's a day that we celebrate all women in STEM, in science technology fields. Women in STEM are underrepresented, and maybe the lack of role models is one reason why. And maybe if we can change that, we can change the way the future generations look at science and technology as a career path. I participated on all the activities, and I also wrote an article about Elizabeth Eleanor Field, who is one of the 19 female chemists who petitioned to be fellows of the Chemistry Society.
When you're a student, the biggest problem is actually doing practical translations. I mean, we get a bunch of different things to do, you know, excerpts of books or whatever that we translate and talk about with our fellow classmates and our teachers. But it's, you know, it's just for us, or it's just for our teachers. We're not actually out there doing something that affects other people or other people will read. So to be given the opportunity to translate something practical that will end up being read by people and used by people, I think just that motivation itself was the biggest positive of this project. Yeah, I mean, thinking that it would have an end reader, I think was probably the biggest thing. And so obviously then my actual translation of it was affected because I was thinking, wow, this is going to be read by people around the world, you know, so I have to, well, not only do I have to be professional about it, but I have to, you know, think of them as my target audience and not just please a teacher or whatever the case may be. So I think that was one of the biggest positives for me. And yeah, just the practical translation work, you know, just getting an opportunity to translate something that I was interested in on a website and that I use regularly, I think was a big positive, yeah. So all of those things were wonderful about this project.
It's been a really rewarding experience and a way of engaging students in how to access and use databases, how to abstract the information from those, and how to use those to develop a web-based resource. So if you're thinking about it, I would say definitely have a go.
So how to summarize two years up in 1 minute. Basically, we had 3 assignments in year 1. We doubled that in year 2. We are now into year 3. And what else could I tell you? The library and university collections now have a new digitization strategy for Edinburgh University that includes contributing to Wikipedia. And we also have a new strategy that for the next 4 years, Wikipedia editing will be part of our Athena Swan commitment in sort of correcting underrepresentation of women in STEM fields by making more visible role models online. So that's probably all I have time for, but there we go. 3 Wikipedia classroom assignments. We're now working with digital sociology, global health. Don't cite Wikipedia, write Wikipedia. Loads of skills. And yeah, that's about it. If you have any questions, I'm very happy to answer them, but I take Tim Berners-Lee's point about the whole nature of the open web, that we need to rethink our relationship with it. And if it will work, it's not working. We need to look at the systems and whether they're actually helping humanity. Are they being constructive or destructive? And I think we could probably argue for Wikipedia being constructive.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Just stay here to get questions. I want really to say something that it comes from the conversation that we had yesterday. Why still teachers and academics question the validity of Wikipedia as a source of information, but they keep promoting doing Facebook groups, and so we can have this conversation later. If anyone has a question, because the next keynote is approaching, so Mohammad Salah, anyone you of course, you are having a question is an honor, so come.
Great talk, thank you. I was compelled. I was interested when you were showing one of the animated GIFs, this idea of the citation hunt. And have you built tools to make it actually, like, how is that working? Do you have a tool to make it easier for students to cite or explain the process? I was just interested.
There's a developer called Guillaume Goncalves. I'm probably saying his name horribly wrong, but he developed Citation Hunt. And it's used as part of Wikipedia's annual One Lib, One Ref campaign. So every January, they run this campaign to celebrate Wikipedia's birthday, and they ask one librarian to add one reference to Wikipedia. So, but I think we can all add references to Wikipedia. And it's actually quite fun if you filter it to a category on Wikipedia that you're actually interested in or knowledgeable about or care about. And you just click through. It'll suggest this little snippet. And it'll click through to the page, and if you're not interested, just click next, and it'll suggest another little snippet.
It's just such a low barrier way to get in besides authoring articles. We used it in Mexico to add people out to Spanish Wikipedia to find the gaps.
Yeah, well, just to pay credit to Alan and Brian, because we've ripped and nicked their Splot idea mercilessly, and we've developed this site called Wiki Games, which Anne-Marie came over and did with you guys, right? And just little short, fun tasks as a way into contributing to Wikipedia, so that it's not presented as an onerous thing or an intimidating thing that some people find. Because once they have a go, they get hooked, and it's just getting people in the room to give it a go and just have that conversation with them as well. And that's what I find is that 9 times out of 10, we come out of with converts every single time.
I just posted the citation hunt tool, so it's all cool. Okay, thank you so much. Thanks for being here.